Alright guys, I'm back with another chapter in Matthew. I'm going to do my best to make it through. I am super congested and sick. Thankfully, school got called off tomorrow because of weather, because I was definitely feeling under the weather for sure. So here we go. We're going to hop right into it. Matthew chapter 27. The Council of Religious Leaders condemns Jesus. Very early in the morning, the leading priests and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for putting Jesus to death. Then they bound him, led him away, and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. Judas hangs himself. When Judas, who had betrayed him, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die, he was filled with remorse. So he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the leading priests and the elders. "I have sinned," he declared, "for I have betrayed an innocent man." "What do we care?" they retorted. "That's your problem." When Judas threw the silver coins down in the temple and went out and hanged himself, the leading priests picked up the coins. "It wouldn't be right to put this money in the temple treasury," they said, "since it was payment for murder." After some discussion, they finally decided to buy the potter's field, and they made it into a cemetery for foreigners. That is why the field is still called the Field of Blood. This fulfilled the prophecy of Jeremiah that says, "They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price at which he was valued by the people of Israel, and purchased the potter's field, as the Lord directed." And Jesus stands trial before Pilate. Now Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor. "Are you the king of the Jews?" the governor asked him. Jesus replied, "You have said it." But when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. "Don't you hear all these charges they are bringing against you?" Pilate demanded. But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. Pilate hands Jesus over to be crucified. Now it was the governor's custom, each year during the Passover celebration, to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Jesus then, just then, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him this message: "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night." Meanwhile, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked again, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" The crowd shouted back, "Barabbas." Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" But the mob roared even louder, "Crucify him." Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere, and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." And all the people yelled back, "We will take responsibility for his death, we and our children." So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Roman soldiers mocked Jesus. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. And they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery and taunted, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him and grabbed a stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. Jesus is led away to be crucified. Along the way, they came across a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene. I think Cyrene. And the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And they went out to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The soldiers gave Jesus wine mixed with bitter gall, but when he had tasted it, he refused to drink it. Jesus is placed on the cross. After they had nailed him to the cross, the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. Then they sat around and kept guard as he hung there. A sign was fastened above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. "Look at you now," they yelled at him. "You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross." The leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't save himself. So he's the King of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the cross right now, and we will believe in him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him now, if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" Even the revolutionaries who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. Jesus dies on the cross. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" Sabachthani. Ooh, that's a tough one. "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a reed stick so he could drink. But the rest said, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him." Then Jesus shouted out again, and he released his spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, went into the holy city of Jerusalem, and appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. They said, "This man truly was the Son of God." And many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. Jesus is laid in the tomb. As evening approached, Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea, who had become a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate issued an order to release it to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a long sheet of clean linen cloth. He placed it in his own new tomb, which had been carved out of the rock. Then he rolled a great stone across the entrance and left. Both Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across from the tomb and watching. Guards are posted at the tomb. The next day on the Sabbath, the leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate. They told him, "Sir, we remember what the deceiver once said while he was still alive. 'After 3 days I will rise from the dead.' So we request that you seal the tomb until the 3rd day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body, and then telling everyone he was raised from the dead. If that happens, we'll be worse off than we were at first." Pilate replied, "Take guards and secure to the best you can." So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it. That was another longer passage, and it looks like chapter 28 for tomorrow is going to be the last passage in Matthew. And it's always super heartbreaking when I read about the crucifixion and how brutal it was. I think the worst part is the mocking. And I know that that might sound silly, especially people that have suffered great physical pains, and almost no one alive has experienced the whipping and the lashing and an actual crucifixion to the extent that he has, and all those different injuries and horrible things that he sustained. But hearing the people that he was there to save mock him and laugh at him and spit on him and beat him, and still the only thing he had in his heart was forgiveness, I couldn't imagine that. It's pretty overwhelming to think about. I know that in my weakest points, had I been given power over my bullies, had I been given power over the people that wanted to hurt me or hurt my loved ones, it's hard to think that I would have had mercy in those situations. And that's heartbreaking to really think and reflect on. He was beaten to such a state, and just such horrible things happened, and he still only had forgiveness in his heart because he knew that that's what his purpose was. And that is super humbling. I couldn't imagine going through that and still knowing that, hey, this is God's will. I'm okay with it, because that's it just makes me laugh, because in my finite caveman brain, it's hard to understand that type of love. I think that, he gave us examples to live up to, and certain things to try and get us to understand that type of sacrifice, and he encourages us to execute to that kind of standard in showing that a husband should love his wife like Jesus loved the church, and the relationship between father and children, and husband and wife, and brother and sister, and all these relationships. He gave us just little bits so that we could slowly understand, little bit by little bit, because he knew that we wouldn't be able to drink from that cup all at once. You have to be built up to take this. And that's exactly what it is. He was a perfect sacrifice. And so much of his life was designed for him to be built up for the specific purpose, which is super humbling. But that's all I have for today, guys. That was Matthew chapter 27. We'll do 28 tomorrow, where it reads, Jesus rises from the dead. So, good news. It's a happy ending. I don't know if you guys read it. Revelations is all doom and gloom, but I tell you what, it is a happy ending. So, we'll get to Matthew 28 tomorrow. I love you. Jesus loves you. And have a good night, and God bless, guys. See ya.